Case file number 4. Date, July 8th, 2022. It's been about a week since this incident happened, and my heart races over it. For clarity, I'm Samantha, and I help my guardian Henry monster hunt. Although I guess we're technically a couple of supernatural explorers who get occasionally attacked by aliens. He really jumped the shark when it came to monster hunting, considering they seem to be looking for him, if anything. In an unexpected turn of events, both Henry and I have found ourselves homeless, and due to the quarantine, of which I was not aware due to being trapped in another dimension, he hasn't been able to find new work to support us. Seriously, he doesn't seem to bother to ask a friend or any family. He just keeps to himself and his odd jobs. And no wonder he hasn't gotten married. My current residency is in a motel, and sleeping arrangements are as annoying as they possibly could be. You see, I like to go commando. One of the benefits of my naturalistic lifestyle. The only problem is that when I go to sleep, I typically wear a long shirt or nightgown. That's a little unnerving when there's a fully grown guy sleeping in another bed near yours. But funny enough, I was more surprised by what he typically wears to bed. I thought he was weird when I saw him fall asleep with jeans on, but I think he was drunk that day. But he's always been drinking since he rescued me, and he'll sometimes lament about some lady named Emma. I wonder if that's an old girlfriend. And yet, the issues aren't really between Henry and me, but between Henry and Kusham. They're constantly bickering, and we have to keep him outside because we don't want his foul smell in the room. Henry laughed at Kusham once, simply because he was homeless too, and reminded him that this was probably payback for making Henry lose his house once. I had no interest in their arguments, and frankly, it was only a matter of time before Kusham snapped and ate Henry. He really needs to not play with fire when there's a literal man-eater in the room with us. I sometimes wonder if I'm the only thing that keeps those two from killing each other. But hey, it's a little interesting, to say the least. I know how much he despises me for bringing that crabby old monster along, but drawing Kusham is pretty fun. On this one particular rainy day, there was a knock at the door, and got Henry on high alert. We had a secret knock for Kusham, so we knew this wasn't him. This was an uninvited guest that we weren't prepared to deal with. Opening the door, there stood a man. He was tall and wore a long, brown trench coat and fedora. I personally thought it was tacky. "Can I help you?" Henry asked, one of his hands reaching for his back pocket where his handgun is. The weird man, who had a strange facial structure that resembled a cross between a man and a goat, had this strange, inhuman voice when he spoke.
"I was looking for Henry Miller. I have some questions to ask him."
"I'm Henry. What brings you to me?" A soft boom of thunder erupted from outside. It had been raining for the last 2 hours now. I was initially begging Henry not to let him in. Alarm signals were going off in my head, and I was already making a discreet move to the bathroom where Henry had kept his M203 and M16. Glad we robbed those protectorate guys. Thankfully, Henry wasn't opening it up further to let him in. He still kept his hands close to his back pocket the entire time as he listened to the man talk.
"I went to a Native American reservation, and they talked about you. They said that you were familiar with Nexus Point."
Henry scratched the back of his head, nervously. "Am I in trouble?"
No. I'm not here to arrest you. I just need some information about where I could activate one."
Now I was intrigued. Both Henry and I exchanged glances, and this time I was a little okay with letting him in, but I was going to have my pistol ready at least. Henry stepped back a little bit, offering the man to sit at the table. I decided now would be the best time to make the tea that Henry and I always liked to drink. As I was making it, I listened to the man's story.
"I'm a researcher in this field. Most of my colleagues are too afraid to investigate them because of a certain meddlesome organization."
I wondered if he was talking about Protectorate. Henry said, "So, why exactly are you coming to me?"
You frequently visit that Native American reserve that was near Auburndale, correct?
Yes?
They mentioned to me that you told them that you were able to activate one, but you never mentioned how.
Henry looked over at me and saw that I was glaring at him. First of all, I was the one who activated it. He was dying from blood loss. Secondly, I tried to send him nonverbal signals to not tell this guy that I was the one who did it in the first place. He can tell him how to use them, but leave me out of this. Something about him made me uncomfortable. He looked a lot like how one might picture Scrooge from A Christmas Carol. He was hunched over, and his body didn't seem to fit quite right from within his heavy clothing. And for a moment, I thought I briefly heard something slimy wriggling from underneath his coat. I don't know how much I can tell you, Mr.
Wilbur Walbrook.
Well, Mr. Walbrook, I'm not too certain I can help you with much else. I did go to another dimension once. I ended up finding a nexus gate when I was injured. I placed my hand on it, and during my confusion, it activated, and the next thing I knew, I found myself in Colorado. He glared at Henry. When I took one look into his eyes, I swear I could almost see madness incarnated. A frightful, menacing evil that was trying to escape from what was behind the face of this grotesque, goatish man.
Are you sure? I am willing to give you some money for this information.
I wasn't too certain as to why Henry was lying. We had a rough idea about how to use one. Frankly speaking, you merely have to put your hand on one and think of a place. Saying home will apparently be enough, even though that's rather vague. I guess in some strange way, these gateways can latch onto our minds and take us to where we want to go through thought. Hey, I'm not saying that it isn't impossible. Perhaps they activate it randomly, or maybe the technique is lost on us. He threw up both hands. I almost felt an urge to go for my gun. Wilbur looked like he was ready to pounce and savagely maul Henry right then and there. He stood up from his chair, tipped his hat, and said,
"Thanks for your time."
Then turned around and exited out into the ferocity of the storm. I relaxed when the door was closed, and Henry looked far more exhausted after that interaction. I started pouring water from the kettle, and Henry spoke up. Jeez, that guy was insane, and he smelled pretty bad. What was he like? I asked, setting down his cup. His eyes were so bizarre to stare into for even a few seconds. I tried to maintain eye contact, but my God, that guy had something swimming inside those pupils. I swear I saw a worm inside. It sent shudders down my spine. I was kind of wishing that Kusham would have been here. Henry took a sip and said, "He's gone. At least now we don't have to worry about him anymore." It was reassuring, but I still had this aching feeling in my heart that something wasn't right yet. I had grown so accustomed to being in danger that I constantly felt it everywhere. But then again, that could just be another word for paranoia. The rain had stopped, and it was getting pretty late. Still, I had to go to the laundromat and pick up some food for us tomorrow. I really wish we would leave Illinois. I never liked this state very much. As I left the convenience store, I accidentally bumped into an old man that was standing suspiciously in my way. Instinctually, I said, "I'm sorry." He turned around, showing off a gray 5 o'clock shadow.
"It's all right, miss. I was actually waiting for you."
I raised an eyebrow and quickly wanted to reach for my pocket knife. "For what reason?" He had a genuinely warm smile, which for some reason put me at ease, even though it shouldn't have. He said,
"I noticed that you and your friend display traces of primordial radiation. You especially have a higher dosage."
This guy knew about primordials. Also, what is primordial radiation? "Hey!" I shouted abruptly. "What are you talking about? And how do you know about that primordial stuff?" He held up his hands with a smile still unbreaking from his face.
"Calm down, Samantha. I'm actually on your side."
My eyes widened. How did he know my name? How does he know about me? He speaks as if I never disappeared from this world. How? He cut me off and spoke with authority.
You best go back to your apartment. Henry's in the middle of his kidnapping.
What? I panicked, dropping my groceries, with only caring about Henry at this point. Whoever that guy was, he better not have had anything to do with this. But then it struck me as to why did I just leave him. I stopped to take a look behind, but he was already gone. I had made a terrible mistake. But I guess I have to get back to the motel and stop whatever is happening. Running through the parking lot, I stopped right outside of the room we were staying in. The door was kicked open, practically torn to shreds. I did not bother to go looking inside because I already knew he was gone. Now, I was alone again, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of despair overwhelming me. But then, I heard the thumping of footsteps from behind.
What's going on? Where's your daddy?
Kusham's voice boomed. I turned back to him and said, "Don't say it like that. It's weird." He chuckled a little.
I know.
I wasn't in the mood for his unconcerned views about Henry's whereabouts. I didn't know where I was going to go, but I knew I needed to find my guardian. Looking around in the parking lot, I noticed that old man again standing near our Jeep. "Hey, you!" He still had that smile on his face. I stormed over to him, Kusham trailing behind. "Where's Henry? Tell me right now." He exhaled with irritation and said,
Wilbur's taking him. I knew it was gonna happen, which is why I went to you first, because I need your help.
"Wait, you knew he was going to kidnap Henry? Did you put him up to this?" He took a few steps back and said,
Goodness, no. I wouldn't work with that thing. He's an outer thing.
Kusham tilted his head in confusion.
An outer thing? What are those?
The man lifted an eyebrow and said,
How long have you been on this planet? My God, the primordials of Earth are so out of touch with the multiverse right now.
I could tell that Kusham felt like he was being looked down on, and he was growing more aggravated by this. "Well, do you know where we can go?" I asked. He looked pleased that I wanted to go out and find Henry. He stretched out his arms and handed me a piece of paper that said, "Go to Welshton, Illinois. There you will find Wilbur Walbrook." I looked back up at him, and I couldn't help but smile a little. This was near the town we were currently staying at, so I think I could get away with driving for a little while. "Kusham, we have to get moving." He looked up at the man, then back to me, nodding.
Fine by me. Let's go save your daddy.
"Stop calling him that." We were pulling up to the town, hoping that cops wouldn't notice my terrible driving. I really should have asked Henry to teach me. In the back seat, Kusham kept grumbling about being driven around all the time. I kept thinking about how he could be such a big baby sometimes. The town was horrendous looking. It was an old backwater village. The people were just as horrendous. I don't want to sound mean, but they looked like they were as far away from humanity than what you would have expected. Their skin was flabby, loose-fitted, like there was something underneath that was wearing their skin. Looking around the town itself, there were some unique features about this area. The town itself looked like it was trapped in the 1800s, but the centuries have not been too kind to any of the buildings. They were rotten, unpainted with blackened wood, and glass windows were either cracked or broken entirely. We were surrounded by open fields of tall yellow grass, and a little further out were thick, dead pine trees that were constantly trapped in orange and brown shades of color. While I thought that was unnerving, I took notice of the many domed hills that surrounded us. This wasn't uncommon in the middle of Illinois, but I happened to glance over and noticed that one particular tall, rocky, and jagged hill had a circular design of boulders with a single obelisk in the center.
I can feel it.
Kusham looked in the same direction as me. That's a nexus point?
Gates.
Whatever, I muttered, before returning my focus to the road. We kept driving further until we reached an old general store. I got out of the car and went inside, where I was greeted by at least 3 people who were loitering about. The clerk also seemed to be an older man who wasn't as affected by whatever it was that was making the people of this town look sickly. "Well, aren't you a new arrival?" He spoke with a Bostonian accent. "I take it you guys don't get a lot of new faces around here." The other 2 patrons ignored my presence, so I had the opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation with the clerk. "Not usually, no. For the most part, we got the same old faces for the last 3 decades, which makes me wonder why you decided to show up when you did, considering the strange things that have been going on." I moved further to the counter and leaned up against it. I did a quick glance around to make sure the other 2 weren't getting in any sort of attack position. I could feel that there was a little tension building up the longer I stayed. "And what strange things might that be?" He leaned in, revealing a rancid odor to me now. "Monsters in the woods, creepy lights from the sky, stuff that only happens here in backwoods country. Now, why would you want to be all the way out here?" "I got lost. I was hoping that you could help me find my way around here." He smiled, revealing his rotten, green teeth. I swear I saw a worm crawl through one of the holes. "Well, we're not exactly an altruistic town here. We don't like outsiders asking questions about our town." This raised an eyebrow, and also made me quite concerned. "And why exactly is that?" "Well, you see." His eyes wavered like he was giving a signal. I could briefly hear the light footsteps of the 2 others trying to approach me from behind. "We're not as human as we once were. Now we do Wilbur's bidding, and he doesn't like outsiders snooping around here." My heart started racing. I knew exactly where this was going, as it was a common thing that they would threaten me back in Warmire. I'm thankful I found a way out, and thankful now that I still do, unlike what happens to... Well, anyway. "Well, I suggest you reconsider." I tried to sound intimidating, but the anxiety was growing because of my past trauma. "And why should we do that?" His toothy grin flipped to shocked terror. I felt an immense measure of relief when I heard the clanking of heavy leather boots hitting the wooden floor.
Because I don't like my future meal to be damaged.
Kusham said from behind the 2 inhumans. I was a little offended by his statement, but I guess he still harbors those carnivorous tendencies. I told him not to kill anyone, so he lifted up both of them and bit off the arm of the one in his right hand, making the other gelatinous human freak try to make a plea for his life, while the other cried out. I would start talking now. I smirked at the clerk. Inside, I was still freaking out because that was cutting it a little too close for comfort. He looked absolutely petrified by what he was seeing. What is that?" "My friend." Kusham scoffed at my statement, but I continued anyway. "And he's going to eat every single one of you if you don't start telling me where Wilbur is." We got plenty of information about what was going on in this town. Apparently, Wilbur has everyone under his control because of a red liquid that he has been giving them for decades. It's made them become gelatinous and grotesque. The only reason the clerk looks somewhat normal is because he's got some immunity to the body modification effects of the drug. Once they gave us the location of Wilbur's house, Kusham removed all of their legs so that they couldn't warn Wilbur. He mentioned how they taste awful compared to normal human meat, which I wasn't too into hearing about. I knew Henry would be upset about what I let Kusham do, but I agreed with my leshy-looking friend, and also because I learned the value of ruthlessness long ago. The directions we were given told us to go further out from town towards a stretch of road that led to a large but otherwise dilapidated house. It was definitely a house that was from the early 1800s, and not too far away was the hill with the nexus gate. I kept thinking in the car about what I was going to do next. I failed to come up with a plan this entire time, and now I was faced with the confrontation. Do I have Kusham and I attempt a frontal assault? Stealth? He opens the door and said,
Well, time to go eat an alien.
I felt a little ashamed of myself for being so indecisive. I wish I could go around with the amount of confidence that he carried with him. Henry also seems to be sure of himself. I took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. Before he reached the door, I got out and quickly ran ahead of him. "We have to sneak in," I said. He couldn't emote, but his tone of voice always was apparent. He spoke with irritation.
Why? I literally could break in and eat the guy. Then we grab Henry and leave.
"We could, but what if there's a trap?" He crossed his arms and scoffed.
Typical humans. Always so overly cautious.
I rolled my eyes and went to the front door. At first I was going to knock, but I changed my mind when I noticed how boarded up the windows were. Something also didn't feel right. The whippoorwills were still nearby, singing their taunts for the two of us to move closer. They watched with great attention to the two of us, and I was reluctant to continue forth. Kusham brushed aside me and walked up to the shed, grabbing hold of the doorknob and tearing the door off in the process.
Stop this fearful procrastination and get a move on,
he ordered. I swallowed, nervous about moving forward. A tightness in my stomach was aggravating me, and I remained reluctant to be here any longer than I had to. There was such a malicious vibe that gripped me. When I opened the door to the shed, there was a small ladder leading down into a carved open hole leading straight down into the underbelly of the hill. I glanced over to Kusham. He was hunched over me, calculating if there was any chance that he would be able to fit. It was an unusually large hole, so it's not like he had much of an excuse. "Let's go," I said, getting ready for the descent. When we reached the bottom, we were at first baffled by the darkness, forcing me to pull out my flashlight, but moving further in. I saw lights in a small chamber fully constructed and furnished into a workspace. There were some old computers from the 90s, newspapers, and photos plastered all over the walls, and books that littered all over the floor, and any desk space that they could be put on. But I saw a chain. I followed the chain over to the back of the room, and when I tugged on it a little bit, I heard the sharp screaming of a man rushing me. I held up the flashlight. It was Henry. "Henry, wait!" He was holding up a big rock, but stopped in his tracks when he saw it was the two of us. "Samantha? Bonehead?" Kusham growled. There was a nickname that Henry had recently come up with for him. "We're here. We came to rescue you," Kusham said.
Yeah, no gravel and gratitude to me.
Henry's body looked like it had been clawed up by something. He already seemed like he was losing his mind. We have to leave this place. It's no good. No good." I put my hands on his cheeks to look into his eyes. There was something wrong with them. They were dilated, even though there was little light. He had seen something that no one should ever lay eyes on. Kusham broke the chain and carried him. Something I knew he disliked, but I wasn't going to be able to do it. Right as we were about to leave, something caught my eye. There was one particular book that was opened on the desk. I took a closer look at what it said. The History of the Nexus Gates. Grabbing the book and stuffing it in my bag, the three of us quickly climbed back out. But what was waiting for us on the surface was far worse. We ran out of the shed and saw that the entire sky was starting to swirl erratically. Clouds were spinning on each other, forming a vortex that was swirling at a rapid speed. The sun itself looked to be warping, and the sky rippled like a drop disturbing calm waters. All three of us noticed that the Nexus Gate was glowing with a vibrant, strong light beam that shot into the sky. creating a thunderous roar across the valley, and sent a shockwave through the ground and almost making us fall down. Kusham spoke.
We might want to turn that off.
After those words escaped his maw, we took off running towards the gateway. Whatever Wilbur had done, we needed to prevent his end goal from being accomplished. Strangely enough, I almost thought I was seeing something slowly fading in. A massive behemoth was trying to phase into our reality, but due to its size, it was taking a lot longer than how normal teleportation works when it comes to these gates. We probably weren't any more than 20 feet away from the rock formations, their fierce purple glow as they created a white tower of light to shoot off into the sky. Would have been a spectacular sight under safer circumstances, but our approach was cut short when Kusham grunted and fell behind my field of vision. Looking back, I saw him drop to the ground, releasing his grip on Henry, who was quick to get back on his feet and take off running ahead towards the gate, ignoring us. His insanity had not disappeared, but I was still more concerned at the fact that there was a shard of metal sticking out through Kusham's chest. He coughed.
That hurt.
Falling down completely, my attention looked further back of us to our assailant. It was Wilbur. He was approaching me, pointing his skeletal finger at Henry.
I just got it working, and he's trying to ruin my hard work.
His voice had changed to a deeper, authoritative tone. I stood up tall, puffing my chest out to look intimidating, but inside I was feeling an incredible amount of butterflies in my stomach. We can't let you bring whatever it is you want. It looks kind of big. The goat-faced man chuckled.
I don't care. I'm bringing my father here.
Father?
Yes. I know humans don't usually point it out, but haven't you been curious about my appearance?
He pulled back his trench coat, revealing what was underneath all those layers of clothing. Once he was fully naked, I was alarmed by the insanely monstrous form that he had been hiding from us all along. His body was about 8 feet, much taller than Kusham. He stood on 2 chicken-like legs. His entire core body was covered in grass for hair, and he had a few dozen worms that were dangling around his thighs. They squirmed and quivered and sent a chill down my spine. His arms were long, skeletal, and underneath each hand was a barb. His abdomen was split down the middle, revealing teeth and a tongue inside the cavity. And his face was changed to match the rest of his body, looking sickly, emaciated, and a pale green. He smiled with diseased, broken teeth.
Now you understand what you're up against.
I did. Although I was scared, I did have something that did give me much-needed courage. A Desert Eagle 50 AE. Is this possible overkill? When it comes to these things, it never is. Quickly pulling it out and firmly keeping my grip, I took aim at him, and he realized just how much he messed up by standing around showing off his grotesque form. But something was clearly funny to him, because he semi-chuckled.
Quite a clever choice.
Before I could pull the trigger, his body started fading in and out like he was shifting. And before I knew it, he was much closer than before. He had closed the distance by about 13 feet. Hey, no fair. He raised his bushy eyebrow.
In combat, never expect any fairness, child.
I knew this was going to be loud, so I prepared myself and took the shot. The recoil wasn't something that I was unfamiliar with, but I still hated hearing the loud bang. It didn't matter, because he dodged my shot, and I had to aim again. I fired 2 more times, but still, he was able to maneuver around them. It shouldn't be possible. He weaved back and forth, throwing me off my game, and forcing me to constantly readjust. I couldn't stand fighting a teleporter, and the fact that he was moving gradually closer to me, potentially moving right past me, and going straight for Henry, was really starting to get me to lose my nerve. I had to protect Henry no matter what. Before I could fire another shot, he grabbed my arm and neck, lifting me up to eye level and making me drop my gun.
How annoying,
He said.
to think a teenager would have this much gall.
I needed to get information out of him. By appearing as a non-threat, I knew how to manipulate these types of guys into monologuing their plans. This had to be something he had been waiting for so long, and this was the best way to get it. Why are you doing this? What do you mean your father's coming through? Sure enough, he let out a few chuckles before saying,
I mean, I finally found a way to bring my father here. He's a creature known only as High Colossus, an animalistic, trillions-of-year-old race.
And you? He took a few steps forward, probably preparing to make me watch as he kills Henry.
I'm his son and servant. For decades I've been trapped in this town and had to pretend to be a normal human being. I had poisoned the town with a special fluid called argotox. Makes them subservient to me.
Why not go to wherever your dad is? Why bring him here? His grip tightened around my neck, and I knew I was starting to get on his nerves with the questions.
Quit being such a pest already with your questioning. I'm bringing him here because we're going to obliterate your wretched planet. Your disgusting race, and all the other lesser beings that call this world home. Humans, primordials, and all the dozens of other aliens living here. The only thing that interests me in the slightest is that great monolith you call the sun.
I was unable to cough out the words. What did you do to Henry?
Unfortunately, I was unable to recall the words needed to activate a gate. I was so young when I was taken away from my father. I had gone through numerous books written by so many of your ancient civilizations, from the philosopher King Cyrus the Great to the relatively wise Native American chiefs of this land. I had to travel all over the world for the answer. I barely managed to survive the lost great city of Astabad in Iran. But the answer always eludes me, with nothing more than rumors, freak accidents, and surviving records of missing cities, countries, and whole continents. So, to get my answer out of him, I had to effectively break his mind.
He growled with such venomous hatred. I smiled, feeling the blood sinking between my teeth as the grip was starting to become unbearable. Bet you weren't expecting Henry to be such a tough nut to break. He moved me away from his face, relieving me to some degree of that nightmare face that not even a mom could love, and prepared his other hand for the striking blow against Henry's back. But thankfully, I'm never truly disarmed. With my one hand free, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my hunting knife. Henry was completely unaware of Wilbur coming up right behind him, too focused on whatever it was that he was doing to the Nexus gate. Wilbur taunted.
I want you to watch as I kill your daddy.
Fed up with hearing that for the third time in the last 10 hours, I popped open my knife and swung my hand into his chest, driving the blade deep in. His eyes widened from shock, and with not a second left to lose, I twisted the handle to inflict even more damage. His hand released me, dropping me to the ground, and I was quick to get back on my feet. His eyes had a blazing hatred in them as he shouted,
Never mind. You die now.
Talons slid out from his fingers, and I prepared myself to block yet again. But this time I was unarmed for real. But I still had to buy Henry time. Although I was absolutely petrified and believed that this would be my end, I was able to mostly not choke out the words. Do your worst. Thanks to my poor choice of words, he slashed upwards across my abdomen, all the way up to my face. Falling on my back, I felt a splash of a warm liquid all over the front of my body and face. there was a crippling, fiercely sharp pain radiating from where he struck me, and on top of that, I felt a breeze dancing across my now exposed chest. Great. My clothes got ruined in the process. What an embarrassing way to go out. Dying feels rather different than what I would have expected it to be. There was no out-of-body experience or a bright light. Instead, it felt like there was only oblivion slithering all over me, slowly wrapping around my body and pulling me into something as non-existent. I almost heard the great screeching of a bird in my ears. Was it those whippoorwills again? But my left eye still saw, even in my deathly state. Some measure of consciousness was left for me to witness how this would end. Wilbur, still holding on to his bleeding neck, attempted to get by me and finish off Henry. But surprisingly, I noticed a blade shoot out from his chest, Kusham latching onto his back and driving his sword into the goatman. I was so happy to see my leshy friend get the killing blow. Pulling the sword out, Wilbur took a few steps forward before dropping to his knees and uttering,
"This wasn't supposed to..."
He took a few more exhaustive breaths, but ultimately lost his strength and collapsed to his side. Kusham fell back as well, barely able to keep himself sat up as he tried to keep the light particles from slipping out of the hole in his chest. And I saw the Tower of Light vanish from existence, and the monstrous roar of the gigantic, vague creature fade from our reality. I smiled slightly as blood flowed from my mouth. I got the words, "He did it," out. Then, I felt a calm, alluring sleep take hold of me. The slithering wrappings of death were calmly putting me to rest as I slowly closed my eyes. But before they were fully shut, I thought I saw that old man from earlier walking towards me, right before I was gone completely. A sudden jolt of breathing shot through me, my heart jumping back to life. My eyes were frozen in place, and I was still trying to process what was happening. Where? What's going on? Putting his white gloves back on, the old man said, "I restored you." When I got up, I felt a breeze where my shirt should have prevented that. The old man noticed and promptly turned his head, saying, "Oh, how unfortunate. Perhaps you should wear my jacket." I looked at my shirt, more upset that it was ruined than the fact the middle was completely exposing me. I actually liked this shirt. It had a green flannel design. I took him up on his offer, putting on his tailor-made gray suit jacket. He walked over to Henry and placed his hands on my now insane friend's head. Henry's head bobbed back and he fell unconscious. I was about to protest what his actions were, but he replied, "Calm down, Samantha. Wilbur showed Henry glimpses of what his father looked like. I had to block out the memories of the insanity-inducing effects of a high colossus. Those animals are too much for a normal human mind to retain." Kusham walked up, seemingly recovered now, after taking parts of Wilbur's body to cover the hole in him.
"So, who are you exactly? Seems like you could have handled all this on your own."
"You're more perceptive than I initially believed. That's good. I was afraid you were all brawn." Well, Kusham didn't like hearing that, and attempted to grab hold of the old man, but was shocked when, instead, the senior citizen grabbed hold of his arm and twisted it completely off, like it was paper. He let out a painful cry, seeing that part of his light was attached to that arm still. "Don't ever think you're a match for me, Primordial. You're a relic, even to your own kind that still lives in the stars. I would get off my high horse if I were you." He tossed the arm to the ground and the light was allowed to leave it and go back to Kusham's core body. "I suggest we go somewhere else to talk about work," he informed us. Rings of light appeared around all four of us, and we were quickly flashed into a trophy room. Except the taxidermy heads and bodies were not animals of Earth, but various alien animals. Henry stirred and quickly regained consciousness. When he saw what was going on, he got off the ground and said,
Wait, did I miss something? Why are we here?
The old man gave us a bright smile. "I'm glad you asked. My name is simply Mr. Ensley. I'm a governor of sorts over Earth." I snickered a little bit. "A governor over Earth?" "Correct. And I've been observing you three ever since your little incident in Auburndale. At first, I thought Henry was going to be the run-of-the-mill adrenaline junkie who tried to take on the deadly creatures of Earth and die shortly afterward. But then he was able to go to another dimension and return with you, Samantha. Then I saw that all three were able to stop that Evo kind. Quite a feat." Henry looked a little bashful, but I was still on the suspicious side. I didn't trust this guy one bit. "Get to the point," I demanded. "Temper, Sam. I want to hire you three. You see, even though I can see just about everything going on in this universe, I can't be everywhere at once. I need extensions, skilled professionals of various races to keep Earth protected. I can give Samantha a new lease on life by providing her with a new identity. Kusham, I can also help you grow stronger, since it seems like old age is starting to catch up to you." He scoffed, but kept staring at his severed arm. "And Henry, you'll be providing lodging and getting paid for every job that you accept. Though I must warn you, your chances of survival aren't looking good, considering that you're all a bunch of rookies." Henry stepped forward in front of Mr. Ensley and looked him in the eye. "You're saying that we can't do freelance work, but rather you will be our provider?" "Freelance?" He laughed. "You three were living in motels and getting nothing done. I need you to stop that primordial war brewing. Plus, there's been a rumor of something bigger behind the scenes, though I don't know much about that right now." It was an offer we couldn't refuse so easily, and you can guess where this ended up going. We signed on. I was given a new identity and will be going back to high school. Mr. Ensley provided us with a substantial amount of money just from this one job alone. Then, he gave Kusham this vial with a blue glow to eat. Apparently, it makes primordials more powerful as long as they regularly take it. Soon, we'll be moving out to Illinois to a semi-small town in Crested Butte, Colorado. I can already feel at home with the beautiful mountains around again. But Mr. Ensley says that he wants us to get a few assignments finished here before we can move into our cabin that's going to be at the entrance of a hotspot for monster activity. So I guess that would be the end of this chapter in my life so far. We're almost catching up to the current time. It's 2022. I'm hoping things can be a lot easier. But who knows? I still don't trust that old man. But so far he's been quite generous at getting us back on our feet. Let's hope this wasn't some treacherous deal that may cost us our lives.